Hi everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be doing my May wrap-up. So I always start with my DNF. So these are a couple of books that I got from the library. I got The Last Spirits in Manhattan, and I was super excited for this one. I had never heard of it until I went to the library and saw it, and it sounded amazing because this is about a Hollywood party that was thrown by Alfred Hitchcock, and he wanted his party to take place in an actual haunted house. And so our main character in the beginning, it was his job to find the perfect spot to host this party because it had to be legitimately haunted, or at least enough that he could make Alfred Hitchcock believe it's haunted. Plus it had to have the creepy atmosphere so that the guests would believe that it's haunted, and have, the space and the amenities that they needed. And so he's just scrambling to find this perfect spot for his party. So this one, unfortunately, that's really all it is. That's the entire plot, is you just have this party and people talk and mingle and whatever else. And while I enjoyed certain conversations, especially between like Alfred Hitchcock and Charles Addams, who is the man who came up with the Addams family, I did like those parts, but there really was no plot. It was really meandering. They had like a little bit of a romance thing going on, but I didn't really care for it. And while there was an actual ghost, it wasn't creepy in any type of way. And these two characters, they spent the whole time at the party just pleading with this ghost, please don't scare anybody, don't come to Alfred Hitchcock or anything, because we believe that he doesn't actually want a haunted house. He just likes to believe that it's haunted, but if he knew it was really haunted and he saw a real life ghost, it might scare him. So they're like, please just don't talk to him, And I thought that this would have like a murder mystery aspect, because if you can see it in the cover, in the back there's like a silhouette of Alfred Hitchcock, and then there's a woman holding a knife. And so I just thought that somebody was going to get murdered at this party, but that's really not what it is. This is historical fiction, because I guess this party really did take place, and obviously nobody got murdered there. But yeah, so while it was somewhat interesting, for the most part it was just very slow and meandering, and when I realized that this is the entire plot, then I was done, so I decided to DNF it. And then the other one I DNF'd was Murder Your Darlings, and this one was actually a pretty decent thriller, and I really loved the author aspects, because we have a main character who is an author, and she gets this email from this really famous author. She's kind of she's not mediocre, but he's like Stephen King, and she's somebody that's a famous author, but not to that level. And so she gets this email from this man who is apparently a huge fan of her books and is a fanboy and gushes about her writing. But she's in a bit of a writing slump, and so he's trying to see if he can break her out of her writing slump, and they start up a romance and they start to fall in love. My problem with this book is it has a lot of sex in it, and I just don't love that in my thrillers. I'm not reading a romance, and even in romance I don't like sex scenes anyways, so having it in a thriller, I just didn't appeal to me. And the plot seemed fairly predictable, like I could tell right away what was actually going on, and so I decided to DNF it. I did read the ending just to see if I was right, and I was. There was one small aspect that was sort of a surprise, but by and large I pretty well guessed what was going on, so I'm glad I didn't slog through it, because at a certain point it really was just sex scenes with this author and her trying to write, and I'm just like, okay, I don't really care anymore, so I DNF'd that one. But the writing wasn't bad, and like I said, if you take all the sex out, it would be a decent thriller, but it just wasn't for me. Okay, so my camera's yelling at me that it's out of storage, so I guess I'm gonna have to pause this, so I'm probably gonna be in a slightly different position when I get back. So this month I also had two NetGalley arcs that I read. One is called Every Exquisite Thing, and this is a YA retelling of The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I really love old horror classics, and so I'm always up for a good retelling. But unfortunately I didn't end up liking this one all that much. In the beginning it was pretty intriguing and interesting. She was at this school, but I couldn't get a read really on what it was. If it was supposed to be a high school, a boarding school, some kind of special school, I'm not really sure, because she does live there. She has roommates and stuff, but it didn't sound like she was in college though. I think she was in high school, so I don't know. Maybe it doesn't take place in America. I know other places they have times when their high schools they have to live there like a boarding school, but Anyways, I'm rambling on about this when it really doesn't matter. So she has self-esteem issues, and she actually has a eating disorder, and so she's always starving herself. And her mom is like a famous actress, and so she's kind of had to live up to this image and tries to be pretty and skinny like her mom. And as you can probably guess, she comes into contact with somebody that tells her about this painter that if you paint your portrait, you get to remain how you are now. And so she's like, oh, great, this is awesome. I'm at my skinniest. I won't eat for a couple days. I'll go take this portrait and then I'll get to be skinny and pretty for the rest of my life. This will be awesome. But of course, that's not what happens. I mean, it is what happens, but there's always a deeper, darker secret when it comes to these portraits that she did not anticipate. And so after she has the procedure done, she's like, oh crap, I made a mistake. What did I get myself into? And so now she's trying to find this mysterious painter and see if he can take back the portrait, especially because other people that she knows have had their portraits done are starting to come up dead. So somebody is targeting them. So great premise. The beginning was pretty intriguing and interesting and everything else, but I don't know, I just started to lose interest about halfway through. It just wasn't keeping my attention. I felt like the ending was pretty rushed and didn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's one aspect in particular about the ending that just seemed nonsensical to me, and I'm just like, what? Why? So I don't know. I didn't love the ending, and I was losing interest in it. I wasn't totally enamored with our main character. I didn't really attach to her very much. So I would probably give this about 3 stars, just based on plot and my enjoyment. But there is a sex scene in this which came out of left field. It was very, very unnecessary. It didn't really have anything to do with the plot, and I just don't think that it belongs in a YA novel, and I thought it was done distastefully, and so I knocked off a half a star for that. So I would actually rate this 2.5 stars. And then the other NetGalley arc that I had was Marion, and this is also a retelling of a classic horror book, although this one I think goes more by the movie rather than the book. I haven't read the book, so I don't know if it's true to the book, but it seems to me that it's going more based on the movie. And so we have our main character Marion, but that's not her real name. She's pretending to be Marion at this hotel called the Billings Hotel. The creepy innkeeper comes to stab her in the shower, just like in the movie, but the twist is that instead of him killing her, she actually defends herself and kills him instead, and it starts this whole chain of events. And this is definitely a book about feminine rage, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really fun. I thought it was really good. I was interested the whole time. We do have a second POV from this woman named Hannah, and she's a private investigator, and so she's trying to figure out what happened. And I didn't really love her chapters as much as Marion's. I didn't find it quite as compelling, but I could understand sort of why it was there. But when I got to the ending, it almost did make that POV sound almost irrelevant. So I don't know how I feel about the other POV, but either way, I did enjoy this one. I thought it was very entertaining, and I would recommend it, and I would give it 4 stars. So because Mother's Day is in May, I just wanted to read a whole lot of books about motherhood and being a mother, and so I read a lot of books that had to pertain to that. And 3 of them were short little novellas. 2 of them were from Keelan Patrick Burke, and the first one's called Sour Candy. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's made its round on the internet a lot, but this is about this creepy kid that shows up at this grocery store, and my main character could tell that the mother is just done. She's had enough, she's exhausted, her son is throwing a fit, and she's done. And then something happens, and this creepy kid ends up at his house claiming that he's his father and that he's always been his son. And he's like, what is going on? And so the rest of the time he's trying to figure out, who is this kid? Why is he here? Why does he have any memories of him? And whether he's going crazy or whether there's something wrong with this kid. So this one definitely has a cosmic horror bent to it, and I don't normally love cosmic horror, but I did think it was done well in this one, and I did enjoy it, and I would give it 4 stars. And then I also read Blanky by the same author, and I liked this one even more than I liked Sour Candy. And this one definitely has to do with grief and how those feelings can build up, and I thought it was really well done, and I also really enjoyed this one and would give it 4 stars. I don't really want to say that much about it because it is so short, but I do like how the author made it seem like it could go either way. It could actually be something supernatural that's happening, or it could just be all in his mind, and he's trying to work through his grief and different things. And I could definitely see where he's an unreliable narrator, and you really could take it the way that you want to. If you want it to be supernatural, you could think of it that way. If you want it to be more in the realm of reality and he's just going crazy, you could look at it that way too. And either way is kind of fun. So I really enjoyed that he was able to do that so well and so seamlessly. And then the last short story that I read was The Pram by Joe Hill. And this one has the same themes as Blanky. It has to do with grief and the loss of a child and how that can affect you in your life. So this one kind of read almost like an allegory or a metaphor, and I really enjoyed that. You know, it just kind of shows this father working through his grief and his resentments and all of that. And I would also give this one 4 stars. And then I read The Surrogate Mother by Frida McFadden, and this is about this lady who is trying so hard to become a mother. She's done IVF, she's gone to fertility clinics and done all the things, but it's just not working. And so they decide ultimately to adopt. But then they're like 3 weeks away from having this child, and the adoption falls through and the birth mother changes her mind. So obviously our main character is devastated, and so her co-worker overhears what happens, and she's like, you know, I have all these student debts and loans, and I actually want to go back to school as well, and I just don't have the money for that. So she's like, if you will pay for my schooling, I will be your surrogate and I will have a child for you. And so at first her and her husband are kind of reluctant, but they talk it through and decide that this is a win-win situation. But of course, because this is a thriller, you know it's not actually a win-win situation, and there's something off about this coworker. I thought this was very fast-paced, and I thought it was very fun and interesting. And while I did find it a bit predictable, it didn't take away from my enjoyment of it. And so this one I would say is maybe a 4, maybe a 4.5 stars. I don't know why it's not a 5-star. It just doesn't quite have that 5-star feeling to it. That's really how I determine 5 stars, is if I really enjoyed it, 4 stars. But if I really enjoyed it, but I also just have this feeling and I just have to keep turning the pages and I don't want to put it down, I want to pick it up every second, then I know it's a 5-star. So while I really enjoyed this one and I really flew through it, it just didn't quite feel like a 5-star, if that makes sense. Oh, I guess I made a mistake. I just found another DNF, so forgive me for that. I usually try to do those up front, but we have Ghost Mother, and this one had all the makings for a great ghost story, and I was really excited for it, but I just didn't jive with the writing. I thought it was pretty amateurish, and I didn't like our main character. I hated her, in fact. I just thought she was crazy and dramatic and selfish. I just didn't like her. And then the husband, I liked him a little bit more. Every once in a while he would say or do something that maybe could come across as a little bit controlling, but at the same time, the way he spoke to his wife, I would probably speak to her that way as well if I was married to her, because she just drove me insane. Like, I don't know, I did not like her. And if I don't like the main character, I can't get behind the main character, I feel no attachment to the main character, then I'm not going to enjoy the book. So I decided to quit while I was ahead. And then we have No Child of Mine, and this is about a woman who gets pregnant, and she didn't want to get pregnant because her family has some kind of curse on it, and she doesn't want to put her children through that, and so she's decided she doesn't want kids. But she accidentally gets pregnant, and and it's not even just the curse. She just never wanted to be a mother. She's very ambitious in her job, and she just would rather focus on her career. So she's devastated by the news that she's pregnant, but her and her husband decide to keep the baby, and the husband's very excited about it. But then over time, her husband's behavior starts to change and more. And so I could definitely see where this could be compared to Rosemary's Baby, although I think Rosemary's Baby is better than this. And I did like this one, but it wasn't like a knockout for me. The curse that's on these women reminded me a lot of the one from Practical Magic. So if you like Practical Magic, you might like this. But I felt like the horror elements were a little bit too minor, a little bit too much in the background. I just wanted more of those horror elements. It was mostly just about the everyday ins and outs of being pregnant and stuff. And while that's what I was looking for, I do want the other aspects too to be amped up. So I would probably put this at maybe a 3.5 stars. And then I read The Perfect Host, and this is a thriller about this rich couple who are doing a gender reveal, but while they're at the gender reveal, somebody gets killed. So I kind of knew going into this that it probably wasn't going to actually be a lot about pregnancy or motherhood or anything anything like that. It was mostly going to be about, discovering who killed this person because they think somebody did it on purpose, that it wasn't just an accident. And I was right. That's pretty well what the plot was more about the murder mystery aspect. There wasn't really a whole lot about motherhood or pregnancy. But I did wish and hope that this had more commentary on gender reveal parties, because I feel like people are getting way too crazy with them, and people in real life do get killed or hurt, or things get caught on fire, and I'm like, it does not need to be that elaborate just for a gender reveal party. And so I kind of wanted commentary on that, but there really wasn't. That was just the vehicle used to have, our murder happen. There really wasn't anything speaking to that part of the plot, which was a little bit of a bummer. I did enjoy my time with this. I never felt like I was disinterested in it, but it's one of those thrillers where you get to the end and you're kind of like, okay, cool, but it's not anything that blew you away. It's not something you would widely recommend. It's not anything that's going to stick with me. I'll probably forget about this one soon. It's just a popcorn thriller. It's just something to while away the day. So I would say probably a 3 or 3.5 stars for this one. And then I also read Tradwife, and this one is also a take on Rosemary's Baby, but it takes it a little bit farther than Rosemary's Baby did. So like if you know the ending to that, it takes that and really runs with it. And so I thought that was really intriguing and interesting. It does have a sex scene or two, which again isn't my favorite, but it wasn't overly long, and it was a little bit more necessary to the plot than some other books, so I didn't really mind it as much. But yeah, I thought this was a really good one. I would definitely recommend this. This definitely has feminine rage to it, and as you can tell from the title, Tradwife, this is about a Tradwife influencer, and it definitely has a lot of commentary on that. She's very much one of these beige moms that has to have the perfect home life, but the only thing missing is she can't get pregnant. She doesn't have a child, and she knows that she can make the best content with a baby. You can only do the perfect home shtick for so long, and so she's like, I really need a baby, but obviously for the wrong reasons. I mean, I think she really does want a child just to have a child, but a big part of it is because she's part of this community who kind of expects that from her. And so it has a lot of commentary about how your presence online could be a little bit too obsessive, and you can get too much involved in your communities, and it makes you act and think a certain way, which maybe isn't healthy. So I enjoyed the commentary there, and I just thought this was really well done. This one, I almost want to give 5 stars, but again, there's just a little bit of me that says it's not quite a 5 stars, so maybe a 4.5. And then we have Dearest, and this is about this woman who, again, wants a child, but she also comes to find out that motherhood is hard, and she doesn't really have the support group. Her husband's gone, and she's left to take care of this baby by herself, and newborns are a lot of work. So she reluctantly gets into contact with her own mother, but they kind of had a falling out, and so she doesn't know if this is going to be a good idea. And so I liked this one because you have her being the mother of her child, but then you also have the relationship with her mom, so you're kind of getting like a generational thing, which I thought was pretty cool and was good for the month of May. And when her mom gets back into town to help her, things go off the rails. Things get crazy and unhinged in the best way. And I heard not too many good things about this. A lot of people didn't tend to like this one. I didn't finish reading it, but I personally really liked it. I thought it was a really good one, and I enjoyed my time with it, and I'd probably give it 4 stars. And then after reading all of these books about babies and pregnancy and motherhood, I was kind of getting sick of it because they're all very similar, and so I was kind of like, okay, I need something different. And so now that it's summertime and my kids are out of school, we went to the library and I found a whole bunch of books, and that's where I got The Last Birds of Manhattan and Murder Your Darlings was during this library trip. So I ended up getting like a big stack of like 8 books and tried to make my way through them. So those ones obviously I DNF'd, but the ones that I didn't DNF are first starting with On Sundays We Pick Flowers. And I don't know how I feel about this one, because on the one hand it was entertaining. I never wanted to put it down or felt bored, but at the same time it was very very sad, so you really have to be in the mood for this type of a book because it does deal with abuse and generational trauma. But my bigger issue with this is I feel like you had the first part, and then you had this whole middle part, and then you had the concluding part. And I feel like the beginning and the end went together, but the whole middle part, I don't know, it seemed disjointed. It didn't really have much to do with anything else. I mean, maybe it was her finding herself and discovering that she deserves love. I don't know, but it just felt a little bit disconnected. But it was still interesting. It was still entertaining, but it just felt a bit disjointed. I thought this one was pretty good for the most part, so I would probably give it 3.5 or 4 stars. This does have a lot of bloody, gory parts to it, so if that's something that makes you squeamish, then maybe skip it because it does have a lot of body horror. But if that doesn't bother you, then I think this is a good one to pick up. It's very short. It's like 200 and some odd pages. And the other thing that I really liked about this book was our main protagonist was 41 years old. You know, normally you have the younger main characters that are in their 20s or 30s. You don't normally get older ones. And by the end of the book, she was like in her mid 50s or early 60s. So I just thought it was good to get a perspective from somebody that was a little bit older. And then we had The Bone Queen. And this is about this woman who goes to this island to see if she can find her daughter, who is seemingly a runaway. But she ran away to this island to find what's called the Bone Queen, because apparently it's this folk tale that she found online, and her daughter believed that she got marked by this queen. And so she's trying to go to this island to find this witch to see if she can take the mark off before she's killed. But her mother doesn't know any of this, and so she just is frantically trying to find her daughter. So this one I sort of liked and I sort of didn't. Like, it was kind of slow and meandering, but at the same time I didn't feel like I needed to DNF it, so maybe give it a 3-star. And then we had The Bog Queen, and I felt the same way about The Bog Queen as I did The Bone Queen, where it was enjoyable and entertaining, but at the same time, like, it wasn't something I was completely in love with or anything, but I also didn't want to DNF it. But that could have also been because this was a pretty short story. And this one is not a horror. This one is more of a historical, I don't know, a historical / folk tale, but not really in the horror way. So our main character, she's I can't remember what she is, like an anthropologist or something. But anyways, they find this body, and I think it's this woman's aunt that was murdered by her husband, but then they call her in to look at the bones to make an ID, but she's like, no, this is not that person. These bones are a lot older. And so come to find out that this was a body from like 2,000 years ago during the Iron Age. And so she's desperately trying to figure out how this woman was killed and find that closure of who this woman was. The interesting part was there was also other things going on, because she wants to dig around the area to find artifacts or different things that could tell her more about this woman. But then you also have a company that's trying to develop this land into like businesses or homes or something. But then you also have the environmentalist groups that's there that's like, this bog cannot be disturbed, you know, this is an ecosystem to lots of animals, and if you kill off, I think it was Pete, then these animals are going to die. So they're trying to rescue the bog itself. And so I thought that part was extremely interesting, because you had all of these warring, conflicting things. But I was disappointed by the end, because I don't know, I thought there was going to be more resolution to everything and they would all come to an agreement. And I don't necessarily need to have a happy ending all the time, but it felt a little bit more incomplete the way it was written. And so I just didn't find the ending to be all that satisfying. And because this book was so short, I felt like everything was a little bit too surface level. And then this is also a dual timeline, and we do have the perspective of the woman from the Iron Age. And I love history. Normally that really gets me. But for some reason in this book, I did not like the historical perspective. I just was bored by it. I didn't care. I wasn't interested. I wasn't connected to her in any way. So I just wanted to get back to the modern times. But because we had that interlude, you know, the other parts were even shorter. And so I just felt like it wasn't properly fleshed out enough. It was a little bit too ambitious for the page count to be so low. But I did think it was, for the most part, well done. And I was very interested in her and her job and the different like political things she had to deal with. I don't know if you would call it political, but you know, the different corporate things she has to deal with. I found all that fascinating. So I don't know how to rate this one because, half of the book, which is this other perspective, I didn't like. So I would like knock it down a lot. But then I did like the other parts, but it also had an unsatisfying ending. So I think I'm just going to go right down the middle and say 2.5. So that's it. That's all the books that I read in May. I feel like I got through quite a bit of books and quite a bit of reading, so I'm happy about that, and I hope June is just as strong. So because it is summertime, I get really, really busy, plus I have my kids around and it makes it hard to film and edit and all this stuff. So I think for the rest of the summer, I'm only going to be doing my wrap-ups. So I'll be doing my June wrap-up, my July wrap-up, and my August wrap-up. And then when school is back in September, then I'll resume doing my weekly videos. So just be aware of that. And thank you for watching. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. Please subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.